John Dickerson is with us now from Washington. So, John, we heard from Senator McCain and from Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway. Senator McCain is part of this group of lawmakers that issued a bipartisan statement Sunday calling for an examination of Russia's role in the election. Can you explain here, what do the battle lines essentially look like?
Well, the battle lines are still emerging. We have at least two things we know. One is that Senator McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham have joined Chuck Schumer and Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island to look into this or call for investigation. Now, the question is what kind. And then you have Donald Trump, who says that this is basically this notion that the Russians were involved in the election for the purposes of helping him get elected is ridiculous. You also have the larger claim he's made, or implicitly makes, which is that the intelligence communities, which are making this claim, or at least feel like they have some signs that point towards it, are not credible. And so that is kind of a sub-theme here that's a part of the conversation going forward.
Mr. Trump says that he respects the intelligence community, but as you pointed out during your conversation with Kellyanne Conway, there was a statement issued in which the Trump transition team hit the intelligence community over its faulty Iraq war intelligence about a decade ago. So I'm wondering, John, what do you make of that? The fact that on the one hand you have Mr. Trump, the president-elect, saying he does in fact have respect for the intelligence community, and at the same time hitting the very same intelligence community.
I would say that's a contradiction. There are two ways in which, because this isn't just about the facts of this particular case. What we're talking about here is a president-elect and his posture towards the intelligence community on which he's going to rely. And by the way, in historical terms, the intelligence community, when it gets in fights with the president, it can get very messy and it can be destabilizing for a country that hopes everybody is rowing in the same direction. Donald Trump has done two things to create some upset. The first is to say that this claim in any form is laughable. So that undermines whatever the intelligence community has come to. That's not to say the intelligence community has 100% certainty, but they have enough of an indication that they are raising the issue with senators. So to call their findings laughable is an affront. And then the second is when this story broke in the Washington Post about the intelligence community and their view of things, the response from the Trump team was not to argue with the facts of the case, but to basically say, remember, these were the folks that thought there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which is to basically undermine all of their findings, to undermine their credibility and their competence. And that is not only something that's just broadly offensive, but it also creates a tension between the president-elect and the intelligence community, and he's about to go work with them. So we're in new territory here.
We'll continue to watch how that plays out. The other story I want to ask you about involves Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump's leading pick for Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who has close ties reportedly with Putin. Does the story of Russian interference with the election give ammunition to those who may oppose a Tillerson confirmation?
I think it does, because you have now you have some new part of the conversation about what the U.S. posture should be towards Russia. Donald Trump has said, why not get along with Russia? Somebody like John McCain says Russia and Vladimir Putin, Russia's a threat, Vladimir Putin is a thug and a murderer. So you have two different views. To the extent that this story animates those who think Russia is a real threat, then Tillerson's connections with Russia in his private enterprise become more a part of the conversation. It raises the stakes for those relationships that he has. You could imagine him, if he were to be nominated in a confirmation process, make the case that understanding Russia is just what you need in this instance. And so, as Senator McCain said, it makes him skeptical, but doesn't mean that he's not going to get a fair hearing. So it definitely means that or a lot of the conversation, if in fact Mr. Trump were to name Mr. Tillerson as his Secretary of State, a lot of the conversation is going to be about Russia.
All right. John Dickerson in Washington for us. John, thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.